Hello, A Green students. Today we are going to talk about the Louisiana Purchase. So, Louisiana Purchase took place in 1803. But before we get to the Louisiana Purchase, let's backtrack a little bit. So, if you remember last chapter, we talked very briefly about something called Pinkness Treaty. And Pinkness Treaty was where Spain and America came to an agreement that Americans could use the port of New Orleans. They could get right of deposit in New Orleans to ship their products out, especially for those southern plantation farmers. 5 years after that treaty, Spain became upset with Western U.S. settlers. Americans were not obeying Spanish laws in New Orleans. Slavery had been outlawed, for one thing, in Spanish territory, and some of those Western settlers were bringing their slaves into Spanish territory. The Americans were also a little bit rowdy and not necessarily following all the rules that the Spanish, wanted in the city itself. So in 1800, Spain closes New Orleans and the lower Mississippi River once again, and basically forbids Americans from using it. Well, this was a crushing blow economically for America. Our right of deposit was taken away. Not having access to the lower Mississippi River was pretty detrimental. Fortunately for the U.S., also later that year, Spain basically gave this huge chunk of land known as the Louisiana Territory to France in some other peace treaty that involved those two countries. Nothing that we have to get into, but basically there was some conflict between those two countries, and they made a treaty. And so this huge chunk of land was given to France. So in 1803, Robert Livingston and future President James Monroe, he'll become our fifth president, they were sent to France with to basically purchase travel rights on the Mississippi River, and Jefferson was wanting to buy the entire city of New Orleans. Okay, and he basically authorized them to spend $10 million. So we're looking to give France $10 million, and then we would take control of the city of New Orleans and get travel rights in the Mississippi River, because Spain no longer controls it. Once Spain gave that chunk of land to France, France now controlled that area. The French leader at the time was a guy named Napoleon Bonaparte. If you remember last chapter, the French Revolution was happening. I know with the snow days and the weird virtual learning, we didn't get a chance to talk much about that in class. But ultimately, the French Revolution kind of fell apart after they beheaded the king and queen. Then they beheaded Robespierre, the French rebel leader. A guy named Napoleon took over, and he was basically head of the military, and he installed himself as a military dictator. So they went from having a king to a crazy French rebel leader chopping everyone's heads off to now a military dictator. So they never were able to achieve that republic like America did, at least not during this time frame. So Napoleon's the military dictator, and if you know anything about Napoleon, he basically wanted to conquer the world. He wanted to be the top dog, and so he was fighting wars all over the globe. And he didn't really want the Louisiana Territory in North America. It wasn't a high priority to him. He was more interested in conquering Europe. So Napoleon declines the $10 million offer, but he basically says, I will sell you all of the Louisiana Territory, which includes New Orleans, and complete control of the Mississippi River, but I want $15 million. Okay? So he ups the price, but he also ups what America would get in return for that. So if we look at this map, so this area, the orange and the light blue, that's America at the time. This is Spanish Florida, and then this chunk of land is French-controlled Louisiana. This is also Spanish territory over here. Oregon's claimed by like 3 different countries. And so Napoleon is wanting to sell us this huge chunk of land for $15 million. We were offering $10 million for this one city and just the ability to travel on the Mississippi River. So this is an awesome opportunity for America. So why was Napoleon wanting to sell so cheap? Well, he needed money to fight his wars and to continue his conquering. He really had little enthusiasm. I mean, the Louisiana Territory wasn't settled. Not many people lived out there. You had some people living off the land, but there wasn't much out there. Wasn't much known about it, to be honest. And he also knew how important New Orleans was to America, and he was afraid that Jefferson might actually go to war over control of New Orleans, so he figured he might as well try to get some money out of it. Why was this a good deal for the USA? I'm going to move my box down here. Well, we needed right of deposit in New Orleans, and this is how we were going to get our goods to market. It would open up for westward expansion. Okay, so some of the colonial cities were starting to get a little bit overcrowded, and this would open that up a little bit. Farming and agriculture could expand. Remember, Jefferson's president, and he is all about farming and agriculture. And it was cheap. This literally is like the greatest real estate deal in all of mankind. So we purchased for $15 million, which is about $250 million in today's currency. It's about 3 cents an acre. Okay, sometimes you might hear 4 cents, sometimes 2.5 cents, but we just kind of average it out to about 3 cents an acre. It is considered by far the greatest real estate deal in history. I already mentioned that. It doubles the size of the United States overnight. So we were this big, we became this big with one purchase. 13 current states were carved out of this territory, including the great state of Missouri. It's about 828,000 square miles or 530 million acres. So let's look at that map again. So look at all the current states that were carved out of that. Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, South Dakota, parts of Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wyoming, obviously Louisiana. So a huge chunk of land there. And again, this was America, orange and blue, and then the next day, this is also America. So immediately Jefferson decided, okay, we need to explore this area and figure out what we have out there. So he hired Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead a group known as the Corps of Discovery. It was Lewis and Clark and 31 other men, and they had 4 main objectives. Number 1, explore and map out the geography of the territory because they really didn't know what was out there. 2, increase scientific knowledge of any new plants and animal species they found. 3, they knew they were going to meet some Native Americans, so let's make peace with the natives that are out there. And 4, still looking for an all-water river route that crosses North America. Remember, going all the way back to the 14 and 1500s, European explorers were looking for this all-water river route that would cut through North America and allow people to travel by boat from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So we're still hoping that that exists. I'm sure you've heard of Sacagawea. We'll talk more about her as the chapter goes on, but she was 16 years old, and she was married to a French fur trader named Charbonneau, and she ended up becoming an invaluable guide and translator. She was pregnant at the time when she joined the expedition and ended up having a baby, Jean-Baptiste, who they nicknamed Pomp. The Corps of Discovery suffered greatly, lots of cold, hunger, and fatigue. It was not an easy journey. Some historians estimate that each person would have needed to eat 9 pounds of meat per day just to keep up their calorie intake, to keep up their strength. 9 pounds. So you think about that. If you go to Hy-Vee or Price Chopper and you get, the packages of ground beef, those usually come in like a 1 pound package. Imagine needing to eat 9 of those a day just to keep up your strength. York was Clark's slave, and York is believed to be the first African American to cross the continent. And York was actually on this expedition treated pretty much as an equal. So was Sacagawea, a Native American woman. They were given voting rights and able to help make the decisions throughout the expedition. Major effects of the Lewis and Clark expedition. They ended up meeting over 50 Indian tribes, they used what were called translation chains, body language, gestures, and symbolic objects to communicate, because they obviously did not speak the language of all 50 Indian tribes. Made over 150 detailed maps of the geography, discovered 300 new plant and animal species, things that they'd never seen before. Discovered that the Northwest Passage does not exist. There is no way to travel by boat from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean by going through North America. And then also there's a guy named Zebulon Pike. Zebulon Pike explored the southwestern part of Louisiana after Lewis and Clark returned. You might have heard of Pike's Peak. Pike's explorations opened up what is known as the Santa Fe Trail, and that led to more settlement in the southwestern region, kind of that Texas, New Mexico, Arizona region. So again, let's look at this map. So Lewis and Clark leave St. Louis. They travel this direction, and then they travel back. Zebulon Pike traveled this direction, even got into Spanish territory, was even arrested for a time. They thought he was a spy, an American spy. Came back around to here. So two pretty important expeditions, but Lewis and Clark's by far the most important. Just another map showing you Lewis and Clark going this direction and then coming back following. And then again, Zebulon Pike. Here's Pike's Peak. And there we go. We'll talk more in class. Thanks for listening.